Thursday night found Jack sitting at the kitchen table, his eyes fixated on the bottle of Miller Lite in front of him. He'd only grabbed a six-pack this time, knowing it was best to keep a clear head in case things took a turn. When the music upstairs finally stopped, Jack figured his wife was wrapping up her usual pre-party routine. Thursdays were normally his late-night workdays, mostly because his wife, Emily, had her regular bachelorette nights with her friends. Jack's parents would take their daughter, Sophie, and Emily would head out with her co-workers for drinks. Jack, meanwhile, stayed at the office, finishing paperwork in hopes of leaving early on Fridays to carve out some time with his family. It all seemed to run like a well-oiled machine. His parents doted on Sophie, Emily got her time to unwind, and he kept the balance with his busy schedule. At least, that's what he thought. But as Emily moved about upstairs, Jack couldn't shake the memory of last Tuesday's lunch with Rachel. He had to go back to that sandwich shop soon. They made the best subs he'd ever had. Sitting there, his focus wandered to the front door of the restaurant as he waited. Sure enough, a familiar face appeared. Rachel. He got up to wave her over, and she made her way to the table. Rachel was the eldest of Emily's old flings, and despite everything, Jack always had a soft spot for her. She was the only one from that crowd who'd settled down, and she wasn't the type to let drama get the better of her. Jack had to admit, Rachel looked good for 31, with her dark hair and pale skin. Even though she wasn't exactly curvy, she had striking legs and a pretty face. Her husband, David, treated her like she was a gift from above, and honestly, she felt the same about him. She slid into the seat across from him, locking eyes with Jack. "Thanks for meeting me, Jack. I know you're swamped," she said, her voice steady but her expression serious. Jack nodded. "No problem, Rachel. But I'll admit, it feels strange to be here without Emily. I usually prefer having her with me when we eat out. But since this is about her, I'm listening. You planning a birthday surprise for her next month?" What he didn't expect was the sadness that flickered in Rachel's eyes at the mention of Emily. "Jack, there's no easy way to say this, but Emily's been seeing someone for a couple of months now," Rachel said, her voice low but clear. Jack felt like he'd just been punched in the gut. "You've got to be kidding me. This is some kind of sick joke, right?" He almost pleaded with her to tell him it wasn't true. "I wish I was joking," Rachel replied, her face softening with sympathy. "It started after you took on that big project at work a few months back. Emily's been acting off ever since, irritable, bored. When we go out, she's not herself anymore. One night, after a few martinis, she let it slip that she felt like you'd abandoned her. She said you two were just another middle-aged couple stuck in a rut, letting life pass by." Before Jack could fully digest her words, the waiter appeared. Rachel ordered a Cobb salad and an iced tea, but Jack was too rattled to even look at the menu. The idea that his wife had been hiding something like this, it didn't sit right. They'd always been up front with each other, or so he thought. Did she sleep with him? Jack asked in a whisper, desperation creeping into his voice. "No, I don't think so. Not yet, at least," Rachel said, glancing at him. "Emily's always been pretty open, so this whole thing surprises me too. But you need to understand something. Every woman I've spoken to says the same thing. Life gets overwhelming, and sometimes the little things fall through the cracks. Emily's been feeling like that for a while now." Rachel paused before continuing. "We were all out one night, and my sister Megan was with us. Well, she's not exactly one to respect marriage vows." "Your sister?" Jack asked, his temper flaring a little. Rachel sighed. "Yeah, my sister's got issues. Our parents were both serial cheaters, and I guess it messed us up in different ways. I learned that cheating only destroys relationships, but Megan, she thinks it's fine as long as you claim to love each other." Jack shook his head in disbelief. "What's your sister got to do with Emily?" "Megan told Emily that if she's not getting what she needs from you, she should find it elsewhere. I told her she was wrong, but then the conversation spiraled. Some of the other women started chiming in, talking about how it's easy to find excitement outside of marriage without anyone finding out. And while Emily said she'd never cheat on you, I think Megan planted the seed of doubt in her mind." Jack could feel the weight of the information sinking in. "Why do you think that?" he asked, though a part of him didn't want to know the answer. "Well, last week, we all went out to the Red Horse Bar, and Emily mentioned our dance plans to some guy named Ethan Hayes. She swore she didn't invite him, but he showed up anyway. The guy's bad news, Jack. Real bad. Now that you know his name, you should know that knowledge is power in situations like this. Jack's tone hardened. Tell me more about this Ethan guy. Rachel gave a faint smile at his sudden intensity. Ethan Hayes is a player, plain and simple. He's known for chasing women, married or not. Ethan is the type of guy who chases anything in a skirt, Rachel began, her tone growing more serious. He doesn't care if she's married, or if she's just average-looking. He thrives on the thrill of the chase. Your wife caught his attention the moment she walked into the office, but until recently, he hadn't made a move. Now, he's zeroed in on her, and instead of putting him in his place, she's just letting it happen. Jack's stomach churned. Rachel didn't sugarcoat it. You're telling me she's not shutting him down? Rachel shook her head. She could stop him if she wanted to. It's no secret that if Ethan racks up one more harassment complaint, he's out of a job. But instead of cutting him off, she keeps letting him get close. I've seen them hanging out in the cafeteria for months now, and when I tried to talk to her about it, she got defensive. She insisted they were just friends, that Ethan listens to her and gets her in a way no one else does. When I asked if she'd act the same way if you were around, she blushed, which told me everything I needed to know. She admitted she wouldn't, then started going on about how you don't notice her anymore. Rachel paused to take a sip of her tea as Jack's mind spun. Emily never said anything about this, about feeling neglected or needing more attention. Maybe he had been too wrapped up in work. He was chasing that promotion hard, and the payoff would be huge for their future. Still, hearing this felt like a punch to the gut. Rachel's voice pulled him back to the moment. After that, I backed off. I didn't want to push her, but I kept watching. For a while, things seemed to calm down at work. I thought maybe it had blown over. But then, 3 weeks ago, something happened. Jack's heart rate quickened. He wasn't sure he wanted to know, but he had to ask. What happened 3 weeks ago? Rachel's eyes softened, sensing his unease. This is where it gets bad, Jack, she warned. We were at the Red Horse Bar again, like usual. Ethan showed up with his friends, and we all danced together. Emily had been drinking more than usual. Ethan kept buying her drinks all night, and before long, she was hammered. I could see it in her eyes, but I didn't realize just how bad it was until I took her to the bathroom. Jack's mind raced. His wife, Emily, drunk and being showered with attention by another man. He didn't want to hear more, but his curiosity wouldn't let him stop. When we came out of the bathroom, Rachel continued, Emily was holding her underwear in her hand. She said she wanted to feel free, which, I'm guessing, was the alcohol talking. I tried to get her to leave, to take her back to my place so she wouldn't go home drunk. But before I could convince her, I saw her and Ethan dancing way too close. They were grinding on each other, practically simulating sex right there on the dance floor. Rachel's face tightened as she recalled the moment. It wasn't just innocent fun, Jack. Everyone saw it. Emily took her underwear and stuffed it into Ethan's pocket. And then, as if that wasn't bad enough, he grabbed her and kissed her, right there, in front of everyone. One of his buddies even recorded the whole thing on his phone. I kept hoping she'd pull away, that she'd realize what was happening, but she didn't. She kissed him back. Jack's breath caught in his throat, his hands clenching the table so hard his knuckles turned white. His mind flashed back to the night Emily had come home late, 2:30 in the morning. Rachel had called him, telling him that Emily had had too much to drink and would be crashing at her place to avoid a DUI. He remembered how Emily had come home the next day, all apologies and excuses. They'd made love that night, and though it had been passionate, he now wondered if she'd been thinking of Ethan the whole time. He felt sick. He excused himself, heading to the restroom to splash water on his face. Gripping the sink, he tried to steady his breathing. How could she do this? He thought, his reflection staring back at him, a mix of rage and disbelief. Was she thinking about him while we were together? The thought of it gnawed at him, and for the first time, Jack felt something break inside him. His wife, the woman he'd loved and trusted, had betrayed him in the most humiliating way. He returned to the table, still in a daze. Rachel gave him a look of sympathy, but he couldn't meet her eyes. His sandwich sat untouched, his appetite long gone. "Tell me," he said finally, his voice hoarse, "what happened after that?" Rachel took a deep breath. "Honestly, Jack, that's about it. Emily's been distant with Ethan since then, though he's still chasing her. She hasn't mentioned him to me, but I saw them talking yesterday at work. When I walked over, they stopped, which, well, it didn't make me feel good. I don't know what's going on between them anymore. I thought it had cooled off, but now I'm not so sure. I knew you needed to hear this because lately, she stopped listening to us, her friends." Jack leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The pieces were falling into place, and it made him furious. He'd been blind to what was happening right under his nose. As the waiter brought the check, Jack quickly grabbed it, fumbling for his credit card. "Thanks, Rachel," he said, his voice flat. "I'm going to have to figure out what to do next." A thought crossed his mind, dark and bitter. "I want to see them together. Maybe if I show up and stare him down, he'll back off." Rachel gave him a small, sad smile. "Be careful, Jack," she said softly. "This isn't something that'll be easy to fix." "Emily mentioned you ladies were going to the Red Horse Bar this week," Jack said, thinking out loud as a plan formed in his mind. "So, this Thursday, I'll show up and watch from the sidelines, see what's really going on between them." He paused mid-sentence, noticing the uncomfortable look on Rachel's face. "What? Did I say something wrong?" Jack asked, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. Rachel sighed, leaning forward. "Jack, Laura has a doctor's appointment early Friday morning, and Sarah is down in Florida visiting her brother. If Emily goes out this Thursday, it won't be with us." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm so sorry, honey. I know you don't want to hear, 'Are you okay?' Because, honestly, who would be? But here's my home phone number," she said, handing him a small card. "If you ever need to talk, call me or David. You know my husband's a marriage counselor. He might be able to help you figure things out." "Thanks for telling me everything, Rachel," Jack said, his voice heavy with gratitude. "I know this couldn't have been easy for you either. You're a good person and a true friend. I don't know what's going to happen, but at least now I can take some action. I appreciate it." Jack stood up, settled the bill with his credit card, and left. Wednesday came, and Jack's day should have been filled with satisfaction. The project he'd been working on made a significant breakthrough. They'd locked in a deal with a startup in Harrisburg that would cut production time by 2 months. Not only that, but they had enough parts to last them a week, even with transportation issues. Just 2 more calls, and they'd finish ahead of schedule, saving millions for the military contract. It meant a hefty bonus for him, just as he'd hoped. His reputation at the company would skyrocket. But instead of feeling like a cat that got the cream, Jack couldn't shake the dread creeping in about going home. How did it come to this? He thought, "I'm killing it at work, but my home life is falling apart." He couldn't just let it slide. Jack wasn't exactly a tech genius, but he figured checking her email was a good start. He managed to log into Emily's Yahoo account, but there was nothing suspicious. "There's got to be another account, one I don't know about," he thought, frowning. Maybe he could get into the home computer, but that felt like a long shot. Jack briefly considered installing security cameras or voice-activated microphones, but that wasn't his style. No, he had another plan. Gather as much information as he could before making any decisions. Whether it meant saving the marriage or walking away, he needed facts. Emily had already picked up their daughter, Sophie, from his parents, and Jack found himself delivering Chinese food to them. When he asked what she wanted, her reply stung more than usual. "After 10 years together, Jack, you should know by now what I like," she had said with that same sharpness in her voice. He shot back sarcastically, "I just wanted to make sure you're still happy with the arrangement." Right after, his phone rang, and she added another request. "Oh, and don't forget the extra egg roll, hon." Normally, I'd be thrilled to get home early, spend time with Emily and Sophie, Jack thought bitterly as he drove home. But now, all he could think about was how things had changed. "This project's taken me away, sure, but that doesn't excuse what she's done." When he walked in, Emily was reaching for a bottle of wine. He stopped for a moment, just watching her. Even after all this, he couldn't deny she was stunning. At 31, she was in her prime, 5 feet tall with curves that were impossible to ignore. Even in sweatpants, Her figure was hard to miss. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and when she turned to face him, she flashed that dazzling smile that had hooked him from the start. For a second, he remembered why he'd fallen for her. God, I'm lucky to have her. Then the reality of the situation hit him like a freight train. I'm so glad you're home, sweetheart, Emily said, walking over and kissing him on the lips. How was work? It went well, Jack replied, forcing a smile. We made a big breakthrough. We're gonna finish the project ahead of schedule by at least a month. He hesitated, then added, Emily, I know I've been away a lot because of this job. It sucks that I can't tell you more, since it's classified. But I need you to know, you and Sophie are my top priority. I'm doing this for us. He searched her face, looking for any sign of guilt, but her expression was hard to read. Is she feeling remorse, or am I just seeing what I want to see? Jack cursed his inability to read people sometimes. He was straightforward, always had been, and he expected the same from others. But when things got complicated, like now, he felt lost. Oh, honey, Emily said, her voice soft and full of emotion. We love you so much, Sophie and I. We just miss having you around more. I know it's temporary, and I'm so glad you see that. I just wish. She trailed off, her eyes glistening as if on the verge of tears. Was she genuinely upset, or was she playing him like a fiddle? And what happens now that the project's wrapping up? She asked, pulling food containers from a bag. Well, Jack began. First off, there's a pretty hefty bonus in it for me. I don't know the exact amount yet, but it'll be substantial. Plus, since this is our first big government project, it'll put me on the radar for more work like this. As project leader, I could end up getting some serious offers from other contractors. Management knows this, so I might even negotiate a few perks. Emily nodded, but Jack could see her mind was elsewhere, and it only made his doubts grow stronger. She's hiding something, he thought, but whether he'd ever get the truth out of her, that remained to be seen. If everything goes as planned, this project will be a huge success, Jack said, trying to focus on his sweet and sour pork. After fumbling with the chopsticks, he switched to a fork and took another bite. Didn't I mention this to you before? He asked between mouthfuls. Emily gave him a small smile. Not that I remember, darling. You've mentioned something about a big contract that was hush-hush, but you didn't go into details. And since then... She trailed off, her smile fading a little. It feels like we haven't really talked much. Then, as if flipping a switch, she brightened up. But it sounds like I'll have my husband back soon. Jack glanced at her, his mind already turning over what to say next. Time to fish for information, he thought. So, what bar are you ladies heading to tomorrow night? He asked casually. I could swing by after work and make sure you're all good to drive home. Emily's gaze shifted to her plate as she pushed around her orange chicken. We're going to the Red Horse Bar again for some group dancing. But don't worry about us. I think we'll be done by the time you're off work, she replied, avoiding eye contact. Jack's stomach dropped. There it is. He forced a smile and nodded, but inside, the unease gnawed at him. Just then, Sophie finished her egg roll and begged for bedtime stories. Grateful for the distraction, Jack cleared his plate, rinsed it in the sink, and scooped his daughter into his arms. For the next hour, he read her story after story until she drifted off, her soft snores filling the room. Glancing over at Emily, he saw she'd fallen asleep too, curled up on the couch with a book resting on her lap. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at her. How did things get so complicated? He carried Sophie upstairs, tucking her snugly into bed and kissing her goodnight. As he watched her sleep, tears welled up in his eyes. God, I hope she remembers these moments with us, before everything changes. Wiping his face, he headed back downstairs. Emily was still asleep, looking peaceful and unaware of the storm brewing in Jack's mind. He pressed a gentle kiss to her lips and pulled a blanket over her before heading upstairs. But he wasn't done for the night. I need answers, he thought grimly. He found Emily's phone plugged into the wall on her nightstand. His heart raced as he unlocked it and started scrolling through her messages. It didn't take long to find what he'd been dreading. His stomach turned as he read the exchanges between Emily and Ethan over the past few months. Him. Hey, beautiful. It was fun watching you and the girls dance last night. Her. Likewise. Jack works late on Thursdays, and the in-laws watch Sophie, so we had a girls' night. Him. Your husband seems like a good guy, letting you have some fun? Her. Yes, he's amazing. For a few weeks, the text stayed friendly enough. Then, he hit a particular conversation that made his blood boil. Her. Rachel gave me a talking to today about our lunch breaks. I was annoyed, but she picked up on everything. Him. Exactly. I don't want any misunderstandings. Her. She asked if Jack would approve of how we've been acting, and it got me thinking we might be giving off the wrong signals. Plus, I shouldn't be confiding all my issues to another guy. I'll try talking to Jack. Him. I understand. But if you can't get his attention, you know where to find me. I'll even treat you to dinner, just as friends. Jack felt a flash of anger. She never tried to talk to me. When would she have even had the chance? He realized it must have been during the chaos of the project's steel supplier problem, when he was buried in work for days. He could have missed a bomb going off during that stretch of time, and it seemed he had. As he continued scrolling, the texts became more alarming. Her. You need to return them today. Him. Return what? Her. Don't play dumb. My friends are furious with me right now, and I don't blame them. If Jack finds out I acted like some tramp, he might leave me. Him. So, you don't want me to show him the video? Her. What video? No one at work can see this. Him. Sam was there. He caught it on his phone. I'll make sure he deletes it, but you owe me. Jack's heart hammered in his chest as he read on. Her. Okay. I can't lose Jack. Not after last night. Him. What happened last night? Her. It's none of your business. Him. Was he mad that you came home late and drunk? Her. Very funny. Hell no. Let's just say something happened that turned everything upside down. Him. So, a little dirty dancing with me made you beg for your husband's forgiveness? He should be thanking me. Her. You're disgusting. Last night was unforgettable, and it was because Jack and I love each other. Now give me back my underwear and make sure that damn video is deleted. Jack felt sick. His wife had thrown herself into the arms of another man, all while still clinging to their marriage, pretending everything was fine. How could she let it get this far? The last text exchange was just days old. Him. I heard the bachelorette party is canceled. How about dinner with me? Her. Not a good idea. Sorry. Him. Come on. Your husband will be at work, and the girls left you alone. We can have a quiet dinner, just like we used to. You owe me. Remember? Her. Okay. I'll meet you at the Red Horse at 8. Him. No. Let's meet at the TGIF at the Sheraton. They've got good drinks, and we won't have to deal with drunk idiots. If things get out of hand, I'll get a room. Her. Fine. But it's just dinner with a friend, and I appreciate you making sure that video never got out. Jack sat there, staring at the phone. His blood was cold, his heart pounding in his ears. Emily had let this guy worm his way into her life, into her head, and all while pretending everything was fine between them. She's already crossed too many lines. He knew now that confronting her would be inevitable. But how, or when, he wasn't sure. For now, he had what he needed, the ugly truth in his hands. It's bad enough that people at work have caught wind of this, Emily's lover texted. Him. Don't stress about it. I saw Sam delete the video. Besides, someone else will do something stupid soon enough, and all eyes will be off you. I'll see you at 8. That's when it hit Jack. This wasn't just some harmless flirtation. This was likely the end of his marriage. How many times had my wife met another man at a hotel bar under the guise of being just friends? He thought bitterly. How could this ever end well? Closing her phone's messaging app, Jack placed it back on the charger and undressed, slipping into bed alone. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, sleep evading him as the reality of what he'd uncovered settled in. His marriage was on the brink, and no matter how he tried to frame it, there didn't seem to be a way out that didn't involve pain. The next morning, Emily descended the stairs, looking radiant in her little black dress, the one she always wore when they went out together. She was stunning, as usual. Her confidence faltered slightly when she noticed Jack sitting at the table, watching her. I didn't expect you to be home so early today, baby, she said with a nervous smile. We need to talk, Emily, Jack replied, his voice cold and steady. "This might be the most important conversation we've ever had. Please, sit down." Emily's expression shifted from confusion to worry as she slowly took a seat. She reached out for his hand, like she always did when they talked seriously, but Jack pulled his hand back, leaving hers hanging in the air. He wasn't here for comfort. He was here for answers. "I know there's no bachelorette party tonight," Jack began, staring directly at her. "I know you've been seeing Ethan Hayes behind my back." Emily's face went pale. "Jack, please, let me explain." "Shut up and listen," Jack shouted, slamming his fist on the table so hard that the sound echoed through the room. Emily flinched, tears instantly springing to her eyes. But Jack felt nothing as he stared at her, cold and detached. Let her cry, he thought. She brought this on herself. "I know you kissed that idiot during lunch breaks. I know you danced with him at the Red Horse Bar, and I know you gave him your underwear after grinding on him like some trashy club girl. The only reason you were all over me 3 weeks ago was because he got you worked up. And I know tonight you're meeting him for a date at a hotel restaurant. What I don't know is if you've already slept with him. But from where I'm standing, there's not much that would stop you." Emily tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Jack continued, keeping his voice controlled. "You've lied to me by omission, about him, about your nights out, about everything. You've broken my trust, and I'm exhausted. I'm not even sure if I want to salvage this marriage. And frankly, your actions suggest you don't care if we stay together either." Jack took a deep breath and laid out her options, his voice chillingly calm. "So, here's what's going to happen. You have 3 choices." He raised a finger. "Option 1. You walk out that door and go to your boyfriend tonight. Even if you don't sleep with him, we're done. There will be no coming back from this." He raised a second finger. "Option 2. You stay here and try to convince me to save this marriage. It's going to be incredibly hard because I don't trust a single word that comes out of your mouth right now. But maybe, just maybe, you'll succeed, because I still love you, and we have a daughter to think about. I'd say there's a 50% chance I'll be willing to try." Finally, he raised a third finger. "Option 3. You take me with you tonight. We confront your boyfriend together. You tell him, in front of me, that it's over and that he is never to speak to you again. After that, I get to talk to him for 15 minutes, just me and him, no witnesses. This is the option that'll earn you the most respect from me, and it's the only one where I'll believe you still want to fix this. If you haven't slept with him yet, I'll be fully committed to making this work. If you have, this is the only path left to maybe salvage what's left of us." Emily looked like she might throw up, her face frozen in horror. Jack stared at her, waiting for a response. "What's it going to be, Emily?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Option 1, 2, or 3? For a long minute, the question lingered in the air, suffocating them both. Finally, Emily managed to speak. "Jack, I'm so sorry about everything. I need to talk to you, and I think we should go together. Let's confront him." Jack blinked. That wasn't the answer he expected. He had thought for sure she'd stay and beg for forgiveness, but agreeing to confront Ethan surprised him. Well, at least she's earned a few points back, he thought, though his trust in her was still in tatters. Without a word, Jack grabbed his keys and followed her to the car. He opened the door for her, out of habit more than anything, and she nearly broke down in tears as he started the engine. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Emily spoke. "I really messed everything up, didn't I?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yeah, Emily," Jack replied, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You really did. What can I do to fix this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack thought for a moment before answering. "First of all, complete honesty. I shouldn't have to say this, but apparently, you think it's okay to lie or leave out details that matter. That stops now, and I don't know how, but you need to figure out a way to make me believe you again. I didn't break this trust, you did." Emily nodded silently, wiping her eyes. "And let me be clear about one more thing," Jack continued. "Ethan is dead to you. No talking to him at work, no asking about his day, no accepting drinks or gifts. If you see him at a bar, you leave. If you can't leave, you call me. You don't communicate with him, no matter what. Understood?" "Yes," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. And tonight, Jack added, when we get home, you're going to tell me everything. I don't want to hear excuses about why you didn't talk to me sooner or how stressed you've been. If you have any resentment towards me, tell me, but you're not dodging this conversation. Emily nodded again, barely able to meet his gaze. And finally, Jack said, his voice softer but still firm, we're going to marriage counseling? You can pick the counselor if you want, but that's non-negotiable. Maybe David can recommend someone, Emily said quietly, after I finished talking. Just then, her phone chimed with a message. She glanced down at the screen and immediately paled even further. It's him wondering where I am, she murmured, her voice barely audible. She handed me the phone without hesitation. I took it, scrolling through the recent texts between her and Ethan. It didn't take long to find today's messages, and what I saw confirmed everything I feared. Him, hey, I booked a room with a jacuzzi. Maybe we can relax after lunch. Bring your bikini. Her, you can't get me drunk enough to take a bath with you. I'm not bringing the bikini. Him, we'll see. You know how things go when you drink. You might not need a bikini. And then, just now. Him, where are you? Her, running a little late. I've got a surprise for you. Him, oh, you brought the bikini. Perfect. I handed her the phone back. She read the messages and hung her head in shame. You know these messages aren't helping your case, right? I said, my voice cold. Just these from today make it seem like you were planning to hook up with him tonight. How much worse is it going to look if I scroll back further? Emily began to sob softly. Jack, I swear, I only intended to have dinner tonight. I wasn't planning to sleep with him. I looked at her like she was completely clueless. Were you planning to give him your underwear after dinner, like you did at the Red Horse Bar? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She couldn't have looked more pale if she tried. She knew I had her cornered. Emily, we're almost there, I said, glancing at the road ahead. You might want to fix your makeup and think about what you're going to say to Ethan. Oh, and stay away from the wine tonight. She pulled down the car visor, grabbed a napkin from the glove compartment, and started wiping her face, trying to compose herself. As she reapplied her mascara, she spoke in a more controlled tone. Jack, I get why you think Ethan was playing me. Listening to you, I think you're right. But how could I have been so blind to it? I know it doesn't seem like it, but I'm not some naive girl. I've turned down men far more charming than Ethan. So why did he target me? I shook my head. That's part of the problem, Emily. You're a smart, beautiful woman, and yet you didn't see what was happening. That's why I have to ask, did you go along with it on purpose? Because it's hard to believe you didn't see through this. She grimaced, her color slowly returning as she straightened up. If you had met a woman at a bar and lied to me about going to dinner with her, I'd be just as furious as you are. No wonder you're angry and hurt. Yeah, I said, my voice flat. You've really messed up, Emily, but I'm giving you a chance to fix it. She leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head at the last second, letting her kiss my cheek instead. The shock on her face was almost amusing. She wasn't used to me pulling away like this. Normally, we showed a lot of affection, but this wasn't a normal situation. I'm not over this, Emily, I said, looking straight ahead. Not by a long shot. She looked crushed. What should I tell him? She asked quietly as we pulled into the restaurant's parking lot. I turned off the engine and let my anger simmer before replying. What do I want you to tell him? How about the truth, Emily? Our relationship is hanging by a thread because of your actions with this guy. You've both shattered the core of our marriage. Our daughter could end up spending Thanksgiving with you and Christmas with me, thanks to this. I paused, watching the weight of my words sink in. So, tell him whatever you want, but make sure it's the truth. Emily sat quietly for a moment, then sighed and opened the car door. We walked together towards the hotel restaurant, though when she reached out for my hand, I didn't pull away, but I didn't exactly welcome the touch either. We entered the restaurant, and a red-haired hostess greeted us at the podium. Party of two, she asked with a polite smile. Before I could respond, Emily stepped forward. We're meeting someone who's already here, she said, her voice steady. The hostess nodded and gestured for us to look around. Emily nudged me gently with her elbow, directing my attention towards the back of the restaurant. There he was, Ethan Hayes, sitting at a table near the hotel entrance, staring at his phone. Emily strode purposefully toward him, and I followed closely behind. Ethan looked up as we approached, a wide smile spreading across his face. But that grin quickly faded when he saw me. His eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "Ethan, this is my husband, John Sullivan," Emily said, her voice firm and unwavering. "He has concerns about our relationship, and I've come to realize he's right. For the first time in our marriage, I've given him reasons to doubt my faithfulness. I'm going to work hard to fix what I've broken, and that means I can no longer have any contact with you." Ethan blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I don't want you to call me, text me, or communicate with me in any way from this point forward," Emily continued. "I take full responsibility for letting things get this far. My husband knows about everything that happened at the Red Horse Bar, and I'm going to do everything I can to rebuild the trust I've destroyed. That includes informing HR about this situation. From now on, any attempt to engage me in non-work-related conversation will be considered unwelcome." Ethan's face tightened, but he stayed silent. "Now," Emily said, turning to me, "I'll be at the bar while you two talk." She leaned in, planting a quick kiss on my cheek before I had a chance to react. "I'm truly sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. I watched her walk away, my gaze following her until she reached the bar and ordered a drink. Well, that went better than expected, I thought, though the knot in my stomach hadn't gone anywhere. Turning back to Ethan, I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. "All right, Ethan," I said, my voice low but firm. "Let's talk." I slid into the seat across from the sleazy playboy, sizing him up. He had dark hair, a slim build, and was dressed like he walked out of a fashion magazine. He might have been considered good-looking, though I've never been much for judging other men. He was probably about my height, but it was hard to tell with him sitting down. One thing I did notice. His eyes kept drifting over to the glass of wine on the table, as if he was waiting for someone else to drink it. That confirmed more than enough for me. It was time to stay calm. I had a rough idea of what I wanted, but I was prepared to figure things out as the conversation unfolded. Quick thinking wasn't my strong suit, but this was a problem I could handle. "So, you thought it'd be a surprise to see her in a bikini?" I asked, forcing a half-smile. His grin was smug, as if he believed he had the upper hand. "Do you really think she told you everything?" he replied, flashing a cocky grin. Now that this fool was sitting in front of me, I felt strangely composed. This situation wasn't as complicated as it seemed. I'd been married to Emily for 8 years. I knew her better than this guy who'd been chasing her for a few months. "Actually, yes," I said evenly. "I've known Emily for 10 years, and I'm married to her. I think I understand her better than some creep who's been sniffing around for 3 months." I kept a smile on my face as the waiter came over. I ordered a double Johnny Walker Black with ice. Ethan wasn't done trying to get under my skin, though. "She sure knows how to please a man," he said, glancing at the glass of wine he'd ordered for her. "That's true," I said, smiling wider. "But I don't think you're speaking from experience." He laughed, clearly trying to provoke me. "Need pictures?" he joked. I felt the urge to lunge across the table and wipe that smirk off his face. But instead, I chuckled and shook my head. "You don't have pictures. If she'd gone that far with you, you wouldn't have to drug her to get what you want." His smile faded, and I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. That told me everything I needed to know. "What are wannabe rapists using these days?" I asked coldly. "GHB? Rohypnol? Or are you just sticking with good old ecstasy?" The color drained from his face. His shock confirmed my suspicion. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "You're a coward. I should beat you to a pulp right now, but I'm not sure I could stop myself before I went too far. I don't want to end up in jail tonight, but you deserve it." I jabbed a finger under his nose. "I gave my wife 3 options earlier, and now I'm giving you 3. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. I raised one finger. "First option, you leave. Right now, you apologize to my wife, and tomorrow you resign from your job. You disappear from our lives and leave the city. I won't come after you, and we'll forget this ever happened." I raised a second finger. "Second option, you go to the police, confess to spiking her drink, and serve your time. You'll stay away from my wife, and I'll keep tabs on you. But I won't come after you as long as you're locked up." After your release, you leave the city. Finally, I raised a third finger. Third option. I've signed us up for a boxing match in 4 weeks. You and I step into the ring, sign waivers, and fight until one of us is unconscious. You wake up in a hospital bed, and you still leave my wife alone. Then, you leave the city. The waiter returned with my drink, just as I finished laying out his choices. I took a long sip, letting the burn of the whiskey calm my nerves. Ethan gave me a sneer. Why would I agree to any of that? You must think I'm a fool. I smiled again, but this time it wasn't friendly. Because if you don't, you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Every time you walk to your car at night, you'll wonder if I or one of my friends is there, waiting to break your legs. Every time someone knocks on your door, you'll wonder if we're coming to tie you up and destroy your life. And every time you sit in a bar, you'll worry that we've slipped something into your drink, so you can experience the hell you tried to put my wife through. I let that sink in, then added, and you won't risk it because you're a coward. His face turned pale again. I pulled out my phone and quietly turned on the voice recorder, hoping to catch him admitting something. You were planning to drug my wife and take advantage of her, weren't you? I asked, leaning back in my chair. You want to gamble the rest of your life on me not following through? Ethan's jaw clenched, but he finally cracked. The drugs were just to loosen her up for when my friends got here, he muttered, his voice low. We were going to have some fun tonight. That was it. My composure snapped. I lunged across the table, grabbing him by the collar. With my free hand, I landed a solid punch to his face, feeling the satisfying crunch of his nose breaking. He let out a yelp, clutching his face as blood poured from his nostrils. You piece of trash, I spat. Go ahead, call the cops. I'll be happy for them to test the wine you were planning to drug her with, and I've got your confession right here on tape. Within 10 minutes, 2 officers arrived. Turns out they'd been eating lunch nearby. They took our statements, collected the wine glass for testing, and searched Ethan, finding a packet of white powder in his pocket. He asked for a lawyer and refused to say anything more after that. The officers listened to the recording on my phone, and though it was a bit muffled, it was clear enough. They confiscated the phone as evidence. By the time Emily and I were done giving statements, it was nearly 4 in the morning. One of the officers took a moment to praise me for protecting my wife from what could have been a horrific situation. Emily was utterly shattered by the time we left the station, her face streaked with tears. Ethan was still in police custody when we left. Emily called my parents, quickly explaining everything. They were understanding and promised to take care of Sophie for the day, even planning to take her to the zoo to keep her mind off things. As we pulled into the garage at home, we sat in silence for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled down. I turned to Emily, and our eyes met, both of us too tired and emotionally drained to say anything at first. She unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned across the console, wrapping her arms around me in a tight embrace. I let her cry on my shoulder for a minute before gently easing her away. Emily, we still need to talk, I said softly, but it's late, and we both need some rest. Tomorrow, we'll go to work, but we'll take the day to sort things out together. How does that sound to you? Yes, Jack, she whispered, wiping her eyes. Getting into bed sounds wonderful. After a brief pause, she added, May I sleep beside you tonight? Of course, baby, I replied, though my heart was heavy with everything still unsaid. The next morning, I woke up, pulling her closer to me. My mind wandered back to the events of the previous night, and for a fleeting moment, I dared to hope that things might turn out okay. But I knew better. We still had hard conversations ahead, decisions to make. I rested my hand on her stomach, and she moved it to her chest, a familiar gesture that stirred something deep inside me, but I forced myself to slow down. Sitting up in bed, I gave her a playful smack on her backside. Come on, let's get up. Let's take a walk. I don't want to have a serious conversation on an empty stomach. We ended up showering together, but it didn't feel intimate. It was just part of the morning routine, a way to get moving. Despite the temptation, I wasn't ready for anything physical until we addressed our issues head-on. We went to breakfast at the International House of Pancakes, keeping things light. We talked about Sophie, her upcoming fun day with my parents. It was almost easy, like we were a regular couple again, just chatting over pancakes and coffee. But I could feel the weight of what still needed to be said pressing on both of us. After the last cup of coffee, we paid the bill and headed home. Once we were back, we sat down at the kitchen table, finally ready to face the truth. Okay, I began, leaning forward. Let me start. You've seen for yourself what kind of man Ethan is, so I won't dwell on that. But I need to ask you straight. He claimed you slept with him a few days ago, and he called me a teddy bear. Is that true? Emily's face tightened. No, Jack. The worst thing that happened was that awful night at the Red Horse. I understand how bad it looks, but I didn't go further than that. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't. How can I trust that? You lied about going out with the girls last night, and you've kept me in the dark about this whole thing with Ethan for months. How do I know there aren't more lies I haven't uncovered yet? Emily looked down, her voice shaking. I know I've broken your trust, and I don't know if I can ever fix it. But what if I took a polygraph test? I raised an eyebrow. A lie detector? She nodded. Yes. Schedule one. Ask me anything you want. Just tell me when and where. Her sincerity took me by surprise. I understand those tests aren't perfect, I said, but it would help to hear the truth straight from you. I'll see what I can arrange. Emily smiled, though it was faint and strained. It's a start. I know there's a lot more to go over, but I want to fix this. I really do. I hope so, I said, sighing. But let me ask you something else. How do we move forward from here? You embarrassed me with that underwear stunt. I can deal with that. But what hurts the most, what's hardest for me to move past, is that you lied about who you were with. You told me you were seeing other girls, but you were meeting Ethan for dinner. How am I supposed to get past that? Tears filled Emily's eyes as she looked at me. Jack, I can only try to explain what was going through my head. First, I'm so sorry for lying to you. When you took on that big project, I felt like I wasn't important anymore. I know why you did it, and I understand how much it meant for your career, but I felt lost. And then Rachel said something about finding romance elsewhere. I never saw it as cheating, but when Ethan came along, I let myself believe it was okay because he made me feel special. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I stayed silent, trying to keep my emotions in check. Ethan asked about my day, my interests, my family, she continued. It felt good to be noticed. And when Rachel confronted me, I realized I was using Ethan to fill a gap I thought you weren't filling. But I never wanted to leave you. I still don't. Emily stood up to get some water, pausing to take a long sip before turning back to me. That night at the Red Horse, I didn't invite him or his friends. They showed up, and Ethan kept buying me drinks. I got way too drunk, and things spiraled. But after that, you and I had that incredible night together, and I was more confused than ever. How could I act so foolishly with him and still have such a deep connection with you? She shook her head, clearly distraught. And then when the video surfaced, I panicked. I tried to cover things up with Ethan. He encouraged it, and in a moment of weakness, I went along with it. I'm so sorry, Jack. Tears ran down her face, though she wasn't sobbing. She was holding herself together, barely. I stood up and pulled her into a hug, kissing her softly on the forehead. We're not there yet, I whispered. But if you're committed, so am I. Emily and I attended counseling for several months after that. It was tough, but talking through everything helped us start rebuilding what we'd lost. One of the biggest takeaways was that we needed better communication, something we'd been good at early on, but had lost along the way. The counselor also suggested Emily get checked for hormonal imbalances. At 31, it felt a little early to be worried about that, but it turned out to be worth it. A change in her birth control helped her feel more balanced. We're not back to where we were before, but we're in a better place now. The polygraph test confirmed Emily was being honest in all the key areas. And though I still have my doubts about the accuracy of those things, it helped put some of my fears to rest. I took up boxing lessons, and Emily got into self-defense classes. Thursday nights turned into a new tradition, training together. It's funny, but sparring has become a sort of foreplay for us. We've found a new rhythm in our relationship. As for my career, the project was finished 6 weeks ahead of schedule and under budget. My company's reputation skyrocketed, and they wanted to promote me to vice president. But I turned it down, too much travel. Instead, I started leading the special projects department with a nice office and a personal assistant. My new assistant is sharp, efficient, and keeps things running smoothly. No complaints there. Most of the $38,000 bonus from the project went into Sophie's college fund, but we saved enough for a week-long all-inclusive resort trip for just Emily and me. My parents are thrilled to take care of Sophie while we're away. I ended up getting charged with assault for punching Ethan that night at the restaurant. But honestly, that $300 fine and 40 hours of community service were the best I've ever spent. Ethan's facing 3 to 5 years for attempted assault and possession of a controlled substance. Turns out that powder he had was GHB. Not long after, Ethan was attacked in a parking lot, beaten by one of his past victim's brothers. The guy's doing 2 to 3 years for it, but let's just say I won't be losing sleep over it. As for Ethan, I deposit $50 a month into his commissary account, just as a reminder of the consequences of crossing me and my family.